When the bus stopped, Pearl gathered her things. She stepped off into the busy city street and felt the rush of life surrounding her. She looked at the skyscrapers touching the sky, and suddenly they felt less intimidating. She could be like those buildings, strong and tall. As she walked into her office building, she thought about how her voice mattered. Speaking up could inspire others. Maybe there was a chance to change minds. With this new resolve, she entered the office. The air was filled with chatter, and she could see her coworkers at their desks, loudly discussing their tasks for the day. Pearl took a moment before joining them, taking a deep breath to calm herself. She remembered her mother's strength and the stories of women who fought for their place. They could not take away her ambition. That day, she vowed to share her thoughts in the team meeting. She would voice her ideas no matter how small or big they were. She knew it would be hard. There might still be doubts, but she was ready to face them. The specter of gender stereotypes loomed over her, but she felt lighter. Each step she took towards her goals was one step closer to overcoming the challenges around her. As she sat down for the meeting, Pearl felt a rush of nervous energy. She looked around the room and noticed her colleagues shifting their attention to her. This was it, the moment for her to speak. She reminded herself that being heard was important. No one could ever change the way things were if they stayed quiet. The journey of defying gender stereotypes was just beginning, and she was ready to take that first step, no matter how difficult. In those moments filled with uncertainty, hope ignited in her heart. She wanted to be a guiding light for others. By sharing her voice, she could build a path toward change. Pearl was not just ready to challenge the status quo. She was prepared to embrace her role in transforming it, and as she opened her mouth to speak, she felt her confidence swell. The road ahead would not be easy, but it was one she was willing to walk. Every journey starts with a single step, and today was hers. As the days went by, Pearl found herself facing more challenges. She decided to speak up in team meetings, but the first few attempts did not go the way she hoped. Each time she shared her ideas, she felt a wave of doubt wash over her. Some of her colleagues were supportive and listened patiently, but others rolled their eyes or spoke over her. These moments made her question if she belonged in her role. The voices around her seemed louder than her own. One afternoon, Pearl sat with her friend Anna at lunchtime. Anna worked in a different department but often shared the same struggles. They talked about work and the frustrations they felt. Anna opened up about her own experiences. She recalled a time when she suggested a new project. The men in her team ignored her idea even though it was good. They did not take her seriously, just as many did not take Pearl seriously. "It is hard," Anna said with a sad smile. "Sometimes I feel like shouting. We work hard but we seem invisible." Pearl nodded in agreement. They spoke about how some people still believe that men were better leaders. These thoughts were deeply seated in society. It made both of them feel like they were going uphill in a strong storm. Each challenge felt related, and each story opened Pearl's eyes wider. As the weeks went on, Pearl began to see patterns. Some coworkers supported her, while others held on to old beliefs. During one meeting when she finally presented her idea, a senior colleague named Mark immediately dismissed it. He smiled as he said, "That won't work, Pearl. We tried something similar before." This comment stung. It didn't matter that she had researched thoroughly and offered a fresh perspective. Mark's words killed her confidence. Here was a moment where power dynamics played out right in front of her. Pearl noticed individuals who were quick to justify the situation, often suggesting that the workplace was just how it was. Some enjoyed their power and felt good holding it. There were voices that dismissed gender issues entirely, claiming they were not real problems. "You're too sensitive," they'd say, or "Why can't you just fit in?" Such comments only added to her feelings of frustration. Yet, with each small setback, Pearl also found support. She developed a close group of women at work who shared similar hopes and dreams. Together, they began looking for solutions. They shared stories about navigating challenges and lifting each other up. They planned small meetings where they discussed ways to encourage each other. This felt new and exciting. Each gathering gave them strength. Pearl began to realize that the issue was bigger than herself. It involved history, culture, and simple biases, but she felt empowered. With every challenge, she found reasons to push back. There were moments of doubt and fear, but the hope inside her burned brighter. She started thinking about how she could make a difference not just for herself but for everyone around her. Together, they could create paths toward understanding and change. With renewed purpose, Pearl decided that she would no longer stay quiet. Each time someone dismissed her, she would respond with calm assertiveness. It became a step towards taking control. She began to speak with confidence and conviction, knowing she was part of something bigger. In doing so, she found her deeper voice. A voice filled with potential to inspire others to rise and defy with her. This was a turning point for Pearl. She was ready to stand firm and uplift others in the process. As the days went on, Pearl found herself thinking deeply about her situation. Every time she spoke in meetings, the same doubts returned. One day, she overheard a conversation between Mark and another colleague during lunch. They laughed about how women just didn't get it. Their voices were casual, but their words hit Pearl hard. It made her realize how deep the issue ran. She was facing a wall built from years of strong beliefs and biases. That afternoon, Pearl felt a wave of frustration. She sat down at her desk, staring at her computer screen, but her thoughts were far away. Why was it so hard to make them see? Why did they keep dismissing her ideas? This wasn't just about her. This was about every woman at work. The barriers were not only personal, they were part of a larger problem. It was time to confront this issue not just for herself but for others too. As Pearl prepared for another meeting, doubts crept back into her mind. What if Mark dismissed her again? What if others joined in? Would anyone have her back? She decided she would stand strong. But the pressure felt overwhelming. She often thought about her coworkers who didn't speak up. Were they waiting for someone else to make a difference? Pearl realized she needed to be that difference, but she felt the weight of expectation on her shoulders. When it was finally time for the meeting, Pearl opened her mouth, determined to share her idea. But as she spoke, she noticed the skeptical looks on some faces. "That's interesting," Mark said quickly. "But we've always done it this way." The words felt like a door slamming shut. A few others nodded, agreeing with him, as if change was a bad idea. Pearl's heart sank. The pressure felt heavy, and her voice wavered for a moment. After the meeting, Pearl's friend Anna approached her. "I saw how they treated you," she said softly. "It wasn't fair." Pearl sighed, feeling the weight of disappointment. "How can I change anything?" she asked. Anna encouraged her to keep trying, but it was hard to see how. The fear of resistance loomed larger every day. Later that week, an article appeared online. It detailed how companies with more women in leadership performed better. Pearl felt excitement as she read it. This could be what she needed. But when she shared it in the office, some colleagues laughed. "That's just silly," one man said. "Women can't lead. It's just a trend." Pearl felt helpless. They did not understand, didn't even want to try. The pushback Clara experienced continued to grow. Outside voices joined in, confirming the resistance she faced. Any positive conversation about women being leaders often ended in jokes or dismissals. People whispered that it would be too hard to change. Each response made the weight heavier, pushing against her determination. But Pearl's frustration also stirred something powerful inside her. She began to see how important her voice was, not just for herself but for those who could not speak. Each moment of resistance added to her strength. Although the obstacle seemed large, Pearl decided it could be overcome. She saw that talking about these challenges was only the start. She realized she needed to share her story widely and bring more women into the conversation. With her heart racing and renewed purpose, Pearl knew she would not give up. She felt her voice gaining strength. Each setback could fuel her fire rather than extinguish it. Change was hard, but she was ready to challenge the deep-rooted stereotypes. The tension of the struggle pushed her forward, igniting a commitment to fight. With this conscious awareness of the depth of the problem, she stepped forward, ready to pave the way for change. It was time to turn her frustrations into action. Pearl was prepared for the journey ahead. The days became tougher for Pearl. Despite her efforts to speak up, the resistance seemed to grow stronger. The meeting room now felt like a cage, closing in around her with every negative comment. Pearl felt trapped between her dreams and the harsh realities of her workplace. She longed for positive change, but day by day, the voices that told her to be quiet grew louder. One afternoon, Pearl gathered the courage to voice her concerns about the lack of women in leadership roles one more time. She prepared her notes with great care. She thought about the stories she had read, the successful women and their journeys. But as she stood before her colleagues, Her heart pounded in her chest. Mark sat at the head of the table, his gaze steady and sharp. Would he dismiss her again? Pearl had to decide, courage or fear. Today, I want to discuss how we can improve our team dynamics. Pearl began, her voice trembling slightly. We need more diverse voices and ideas at the table. As she spoke, she could see Mark's eyes narrow. Then he interrupted. Pearl, we've always done things our way. Why change it now? His tone was firm, making the stakes very clear. The room felt heavy and silent, all eyes were on her. At that moment, Pearl faced a crossroads. She could walk away or push forward. If she decided to challenge Mark more actively, she risked losing respect from some of her coworkers. They could blame her for being difficult. What if she faced backlash? It could mean losing her chances for promotion, or even becoming isolated. Yet, the thought of staying quiet again made her feel small. Internal doubt rumbled inside her like thunder. Would anyone stand beside her? What if she lost her job? Still, the frustration built up over time urged her to keep going. She remembered her mother's advice. Sometimes you must shake things up to create change. She could not ignore these feelings. Pearl took a deep breath and steadied her hands. I believe that we can be better. I see our team struggling to get new ideas. We miss chances because we shut out voices. I am not saying we ignore what works, but we need balance. Different perspectives help us grow. The words felt good as they left her mouth. However, she could feel Mark's anger rising like a fire. His face turned sharply towards her. Anyone can say that, he snapped, his voice cold. But we have results to think about. We can't waste time on what doesn't work. There was a tension in the room, a hot pulse of discomfort. Pearl could see others looking uneasy, uncertain of whether to support her or stay with the status quo. It struck her hard that speaking the truth might lead to her isolation. Yet, she felt the stakes were too high to remain silent. The feelings churned as she wrestled with fear and hope. These moments felt like shaking the very foundation of her career. Was she prepared to lose it all to speak her truth? Her resolve hardened. Slowly and solemnly, Pearl made her decision. I am worthy of being here, and so are many women. I refuse to be quiet. We need to have this conversation or nothing will change. The words spilled out from her heart. In those moments, time slowed down, and her voice rang with clarity. Now it was all on the line. She either took this stand or stepped back into a cage built on silence. This was the breaking point, and she was ready for whatever came next. Pearl stood her ground, her heart racing with fear and determination. The room was tense. Mark glared at her with annoyance, while some coworkers shifted awkwardly in their seats. She could almost feel the eyes of the room pinning her in place. To ignore the voices of women is to ignore our potential. We have to open our minds, she continued, her voice steadying despite the storm inside. Suddenly, one of the quieter team members, Lisa, spoke up. I agree with Pearl. We should listen to her ideas. They might help our project. The willingness to support her surprised Pearl, creating a small spark of hope. But Mark did not back down. Instead, he said, just because you think they are good ideas doesn't mean they will work. Keep that in mind when you throw out such opinions. Pearl felt her stomach drop. The pushback felt personal. But she thought about the weight of the issue and how many others might feel as she did. If she backed down now, what message would it send? It wasn't just about her anymore, it was about all women. The fear was still there, but it mixed with anger and hope. At this moment, she knew she had to push harder, no matter the cost. Mark, with all due respect, change is hard for everyone. But we can't grow by sticking to the same plan. Many ideas can support our goals, and diversity is key. It's not just about you or me, it's about the whole team, she said, feeling her voice grow stronger. Mark's face turned red, anger rising like a wave. You need to know your place, Pearl. We have done fine without this nonsense. His words cut deep. The harsh tones made the air feel sharp and electric, but Pearl refused to be silenced. The buzzing excitement and tension fueled her confidence. Actually, the nonsense is believing that only one viewpoint matters. We should include other voices. We can improve our results, and good ideas can come from those who are not always heard, she replied. The moment hung thick with anticipation. Pearl knew she was against the tide, but a weight inside her seemed to lift. She felt free as if she had unleashed something true. Then a few colleagues shifted in their seats. Eyes moved nervously between each other, waiting to see if someone else would join the conversation. An uneasy silence reigned. But Pearl was not finished. If we dismiss new ideas, we miss great chances. Isn't that a risk we cannot afford to take? She challenged. In that moment, the room bristled with discomfort. The people who had previously sat in silence now exchanged glances. Pearl felt pressure all around but did not turn away. This was it. Either they would listen or Mark would push back harder. Mark's jaw clenched and he breathed heavily, facing her like a raging storm. You want change, Pearl? We do things my way here. Feeling hearts pounding, Lisa spoke again, her voice shaky but clear. But change makes us stronger. We need to be open. We trust Pearl as a team member, and I believe she can lead us to new heights. Her words echoed through the room, sending ripples of support Pearl had longed for. Pearl could feel the room shifting. This was the moment where everything would change. She had voiced what others were afraid to say, facing the powerful voices that had held them back for too long. The stakes were at their highest. Would the team choose to listen, or would they fall back into old ways? This pivotal decision awaited them, hanging in the air like a tightening noose, filled with hope and urgency. Pearl knew the fight had just begun, but this time she felt ready to battle. The system could be challenged and she had taken the first step. The air in the meeting room grew heavy after Pearl's bold statement. Conversations lingered unspoken as everyone absorbed what had just happened. Some people looked uncertain, while others whispered quietly among themselves. Pearl's heart raced, but she stood tall, ready to face whatever came next. Almost immediately, Mark broke the silence. This is not how we run things here, he declared, his voice firm and unyielding. Yet, Pearl noticed something had shifted. A few coworkers, including Lisa, stood with her, nodding in solidarity. They understood Pearl's point about the need for change. The road ahead was foggy, but there was a glimmer of hope. After the meeting ended, Pearl felt a mix of emotions. Despite Mark's strong words, she sensed a new movement within the group. Over the next few days, small shifts began to unfold. Team discussions became slightly more open. Coworkers who had once kept quiet now shared their thoughts, even if they were small. One by one, they started voicing concerns about the need for diverse ideas. It was a start that Pearl had not expected. Even in the face of Mark's authority, things felt unsettled. Moreover, Pearl received messages from some team members after the meeting. They sent supportive notes saying things like, "Thank you for speaking up. I really appreciated it." This encouragement felt incredible. Pearl realized she wasn't alone. They wanted to see change, but fear often silenced them. This moment triggered small victories, even if they were not large or life-changing. However, not everyone was open to the shift. Mark continued to push back. He had a firm grip on the way things were done, and he made that clear in following meetings. Whether through skeptical glances or tough comments, his resistance was unyielding. He insisted on sticking with old traditions. Pearl felt the pressure but remembered the support from her teammates. One afternoon during a team lunch, comments about Pearl's statement began to emerge as a topic of chatter. Some believed things needed to change, while others preferred Mark's style. Discussions heated up, showcasing a mixture of opinions. Pearl felt nervous that it could easily shift the balance. The division was evident. Some called for innovation, while others resisted any change at all. That evening, Pearl returned home to process everything. She felt the burden of the mixed responses but knew progress wasn't going to be simple. Change takes time and determination. She reflected on how standing up had impacted her world, even if things felt far from perfect. The weeks ahead would be difficult, but she could feel the energy building among her colleagues, and for the first time, many were willing to engage in the fight for change. The catalyst of the meeting and the discussions that followed were part of a small fire igniting within the team. They were no longer content to simply accept things as they were. Pearl felt more empowered as people began to rally for a deeper conversation. Then the energy shifted again, as a few team members started sharing ideas outside of meetings. Informal gatherings began to pop up through message groups. They were creating spaces for open discussions. Although the road ahead was still filled with obstacles and tensions with Mark remained, Pearl could feel change beginning to take root. The struggles continued to surface, but there were small victories along the way where people shared their stories and supported each other. Never had she imagined she could influence anything so significant. With these newfound connections and understanding, Pearl realized that the fight for change was just starting. The journey could be long, but it was one worth taking. Together, they were paving the way for a brighter future. In the following weeks, the atmosphere in the office shifted. Pearl's bold stand had started to create a ripple effect, slowly spreading through the entire team. While some colleagues were still hesitant, many began to support the idea of change. There were whispers in the break room about encouraging women to share their ideas in meetings. These voices began to build a movement within the workplace. Outside the company, Pearl's actions received attention too. One day, she was contacted by a local community group focused on women's rights. They had heard about her efforts to challenge gender roles at work. They wanted her to share her story at an upcoming event. Pearl felt a rush of emotions. It was an exciting opportunity but also intimidating. Sharing her experience could inspire others, and she accepted the invitation. At the event, Pearl stood on stage speaking to a crowded room. She shared her journey and the challenges she faced at work. People listened attentively, nodding in agreement as she shared feelings of doubt and fear, but also hope. The audience ranged from young students to professionals, all eager to hear about her fight for change. As she spoke, she felt the collective energy around her. Many women shared similar stories, and it brought legitimacy to her journey. However, not all feedback was positive. A small group in the audience voiced their disagreement. They argued that speaking up would only create more problems. Their view echoed old stereotypes, making Pearl realize that resistance to change still existed. Even in a supportive environment, some felt safer with the status quo. Pearl took a deep breath as she responded to their comments. Change is not easy, she explained. But staying silent is not the answer. Public reactions varied, and as Pearl shared with her team afterward, she learned some were inspired while others were less moved. Mark, still holding on to his power, took notice of Pearl's involvement in the community event. His discontent was evident. Following her speech, he summoned her to his office with a serious look on his face. "I hope you understand," he said, his voice cold, "that these events might not reflect well on the company." Pearl's stomach nodded. Mark was making it clear that he was not pleased with her newfound voice in the community. Despite some pushback, Pearl felt stronger than ever. She knew challenges were part of creating change. Her colleagues began discussing the event within the office. Some asked thoughtful questions about how they could support and engage more. Pearl felt even more determined to continue this fight. The discussions were leading them closer to change, and every small effort mattered. Every day, Pearl worked to bridge gaps among her colleagues. She arranged informal gatherings where they could discuss ideas about leadership and empowerment for women. Awareness was slowly building. Some men began to join these meetings, showing that they wanted to learn. It brought new perspectives to the conversations, opening doors for better understanding among coworkers. The path forward was not always easy. There were still moments when Pearl faced doubt, both from herself and from others. Change takes time and resistance remained. Yet she continued to empower herself and others around her. With each conversation and each shared experience, the hope for change became brighter. Pearl recognized that they were on a long journey together. It would not happen overnight, but together they could create a culture of understanding and support. They were not just talking about change, they were starting to feel it. As her team began to embrace these discussions, Pearl ached for a future where differences would be celebrated rather than feared. The process was slow, but piece by piece, they were uncovering the change they wished to see. Each step built upon the previous one, and Pearl felt proud of the direction they were heading. Several months had passed since that pivotal meeting. Pearl sat at her desk, reflecting on her journey. The memory of her nervousness echoed in her mind, but now she felt more confident. Standing up for herself had changed her life. It had also begun to change her workplace. Conversations that once felt awkward encountered new energy. Team members were now willing to share, and the silence that once filled the room had transformed into meaningful dialogue. Pearl looked around her office, noticing how more people were collaborating. Some women who once hesitated to speak now shared their ideas openly. There was a real sense of support among her colleagues. Even men in the office began to champion their female coworkers. It made the atmosphere feel lighter. A gentle blend of voices sharing success and hopes. This was a beautiful change, and Pearl felt her heart swell with pride. However, there were still challenges. Mark continued to hold on to his old ways. He often made cutting remarks about the new ideas, Although resistance remained, Pearl recognized that those comments did not define her or her efforts. They were simply a reminder that change was not always welcomed by everyone. Instead of discouraging her, it motivated her further. She wanted to show that her voice, and the voices of others, could not be silenced easily. Pearl reflected on what she had learned during this journey. She realized the power of speaking up was not just about being heard. It was about inspiring others to do the same. Each person's voice mattered, and together they formed a chorus that could not be ignored. She understood now that becoming a leader meant creating spaces where everyone felt safe to speak. Taking a moment to breathe deeply, Pearl acknowledged how she once feared confrontation. But that fear led her to a place of growth. It helped pave her path toward self-acceptance and empowerment. She learned to embrace her identity as a leader and not just a follower. Every step she took was brave, even if it didn't feel that way in the moment. Challenges wouldn't simply disappear, but she learned to face them directly. Moreover, Pearl understood that her journey was ongoing. There would always be work to do and continued struggles to fight. For every voice that found confidence, there might still be another silenced by doubt. But each small victory was important. She felt connected to others who were still pushing for their place. Together, they would keep the momentum alive, believing in positive change. With renewed purpose, Pearl decided to team up with her colleagues to start regular workshops. They aimed to support each other and encourage self-expression. She wanted others to feel as strong as she did now. It was essential to create an environment where everyone's opinions mattered, including those who still felt unsure. As she looked to the future, Pearl felt hopeful. The challenges were many, but they were also a source of strength. Every setback taught her something valuable. Change was a journey that required patience, unity, and dedication. Reflecting on her path renewed her resolve. They had begun uncovering a path filled with growth and courage. Change was not always quick, yet every step taken was meaningful. The echoes of her journey resonated deep within. This was just the start for her and for others. Together, they would continue to build a more inclusive world, one voice at a time. With each passing week, Pearl saw more changes unfold at work. The workshops she started gained popularity. Team members eagerly attended, sharing ideas and experiences. The sense of community grew stronger, and Pearl felt warmth spread through the office. Women and men began to engage in new ways, brainstorming together with energy and passion. The days of silence were fading, and discussions flourished. One day, during one of their workshops, Lisa raised her hand. "I never thought I could speak freely before. Now I share my ideas in meetings," she admitted, her smile bright. Others nodded, encouraging her as she spoke. Pearl felt proud. She realized their journey was not just hers anymore. It was a group effort. Each person had taken small steps towards finding their voice. Meanwhile, Mark had to confront the new reality. Although he was reluctant to change, he couldn't ignore the growing support among the team. More and more team members openly challenged his ideas and pushed back on his harsh comments. Mark slowly began to rethink some old habits. It did not mean he agreed with change completely, but he started to listen more than before. Pearl recognized that some battles would take a long time to win, but this was a victory worth celebrating. She cherished seeing her colleagues succeed in their right to speak up. Their stories painted a colorful tapestry of courage, supporting one another through the challenges they faced. As the months passed, Pearl felt grateful for her journey. She often reflected on how her bold decision to speak up altered the course of her career. Her newfound confidence opened doors to opportunities she had never imagined. She began participating in industry events, sharing her experiences and educating others about the importance of inclusiveness in the workplace. In her heart, Pearl recognized that change did not come quickly. The seeds of growth had to be nurtured, and it required everyone pouring in their ideas, time, and care. There were still hurdles to overcome, especially dealing with stubborn stereotypes. But she learned to see resistance as a chance to spark courage in herself and others. Finally, the team decided to host a gathering to celebrate their progress. Pearl speared into action, inviting everyone from the higher-ups to co-workers across the different departments. They would showcase stories of their changes and the paths they took, inspiring everyone involved. It was to be a night of sharing, connecting, and acknowledging their hard work. As the event unfolded, Pearl stood backstage, feeling excitement all around her. She reflected on how far they had come as a team. Change was in motion, and she knew inspiration was contagious. Each story shared that night carried the potential to ignite something new. As she took the stage, she opened her heart to the crowd. "Together we have found our strength," she began. "Let us remember this moment as we move forward." Her voice resonated throughout the room, engulfing everyone in unity. Change may take time, but it starts with each one of us. What will you do to share your voice and inspire others? How will you challenge the norms that hold us back? As Pearl stepped down from the stage, she felt a sense of joy. Each person in that room had their own journey to take. By sharing experiences, they connected, learned, and felt empowered to create change. The future held great promise, and they all knew the journey was just beginning. Their combined strength would guide them to a brighter tomorrow. Pearl had learned that every story mattered, and together they were only getting started. How might you contribute to the change you want to see?